Yeah, that's another good question. Again, when I was in Canada, that was a question that came up, and there was a couple city councilors there, and they were saying that in at least their perspective, what they're told in city council is that if there's competition from a private enterprise, the government should exit the enterprise. So there shouldn't be the government should only run things that the private economy doesn't want to run, essentially was their concept. The question of competition in the economics literature is actually quite interesting. So there's one school of thought that says that competition will actually be good for both private enterprise and public enterprise. It will lower costs, and it will, for a public enterprise, having some competition will increase efficiencies and so on and so forth. The example I like to use on the lowering costs is in North Carolina. They had one of the city, I think it was Wilson, North Carolina, set up a publicly owned internet system, broadband, in North Carolina, and it competed with, I think it was Comcast or Time Warner or someone like that. And in the town of Wilson, Comcast kept its rates exactly the same for 5 years so that they could compete with the publicly owned internet company. But in every other jurisdiction around Wilson where they had a monopoly, they raised their rates like 25 or 30% over the 5-year period. So that competition allowed costs to come down across the board for both publicly owned enterprise consumers and also privately owned enterprise consumers. There's another school of thought that really says that competition isn't appropriate, especially in certain sectors, especially natural monopoly sectors, the utility sectors, and so on and so forth. You just want to have one monopoly player that's able to provide the service or the good for all of society at low costs. You can have efficiencies of scale and so on and so forth. So it's an open debate, and I think some sectors lend themselves to competition and some sectors do not, obviously. I think water is one where you really don't want to have competition. Energy might be another one where I'd say you probably don't want to have competition. Other places you may want broadband. You may want to have a publicly owned broadband company competing against a privately owned one to increase efficiencies on both sides.